Okay, so we are in Yakov, and it's on page 20A2. Like I said, it's old school. It's all you do. Okay. It says, Umachizin et or. So the Mishnah stated, and we may ignite the pyre of the temple fire chamber on Friday close to nightfall. So the Gemara provides the reason for this ruling. He says, from where do we know these words? And the famous question from the rabbis, where do we know this from? And he says, actually, in 17, this expression, which introduces a search for a scriptural source, seems out of place here. Certainly, the ban against igniting pyres on Friday, just before nightfall, mentioned at the end of the Mishnah, is only rabbinic. It's not from the Torah. And the Gemara here is seeking to know why the rabbis lifted their ban in the case of the temple pyre. Why is the Gemara seeking a scriptural source for this? After all, it's only rabbinic, so you can't go to the Torah to find a source for the rabbinic rules here. Pnei Yeshua suggests that it is not the Gemara that is asking from where are these things known, but rather it's Rabbi Rav Huna, who is prefacing his marks to follow with this introduction. And as we shall see, Rav Huna holds that the reason the rabbis permitted igniting the temple pyres just before Shabbat is that biblically it is permitted to do so even in the temple, even on Shabbat. Rav Huna then can rightfully open his statement with Mina Hanamili, from where are these words known? Okay. So Rav Huna said, the Torah says, Lo tu va'aru eish b'chol moshvetechem. That the Torah states, you shall not kindle fire in any of your dwellings on the Shabbat day. So this verse that prohibits igniting a fire on Shabbat, right? So if anybody wants to know why you cannot drive on Shabbat, it is because of lo tivaru eish chol moshvatechem. You can't kindle a fire. We're dealing with a combustion engine.
You're causing the engine to
continually to fire. You start it up. We're assuming that you didn't leave it open. Even if you did leave it open, even if you did leave it going the whole Shabbat, is still you press the gas. You're causing more fuel to go in, so on and so forth. So that is why one is not allowed to drive on Shabbat. The other reason, another thing is you cannot put electricity on because of the same thing. Lo tavaru es b'chol moshvatechem. You can't make a fire in any of your places. So if I turn on, if I turn on the light, what I've done is I've flicked the switch, allowed the electrical pulse to go through, and thus it touches whatever it needs to touch, and I've created a fire. What is a fire defined as according to halacha? Is something that can cause something else to start burning. So if I use electricity, then even if you wanted to argue that the electricity is not fire in the classical sense, since it can cause a fire, that is what makes it fire. That's why coal would be considered fire. Burning coal.
Right. So driving cars and doing all that stuff is prohibited.
Yes.
So the reason we shouldn't ride a bicycle is because if it breaks down, you have to leave it there.
That's it. Yes, you can't. You're also carrying your bicycle.
Right.
Right. So there's two issues. You're carrying the bicycle, then you may, if it breaks down, you would fix it. You're not going to just leave it there. So you'll tell me you would leave it there, and the answer is no. We're not going to trust people to do that. They're going to try to do something to get it home. So, and on top of that, you're carrying it, by the way. So then you have to say, I'm in an Eruv. Yeah. But again, that's not the right. So that would be all those issues that go with it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the Torah's emphasis is on the word b'moshvotechem, right? It says b'chol moshvotechem iatam avir. So it says in all of your dwellings you may not kindle the fire. Aval atam avir b'medoro b'amokad. But you may kindle a fire in the pyre of the temple fire chamber even on the Shabbat, because it says in your house. It doesn't say in the temple's house, right? So thus the Torah in fact permits kindling the temple pyre even on Shabbat. Therefore the rabbis did not forbid kindling it Friday before nightfall, since even if one were to see the fire dying on Shabbat and then stroke the fire, he would not be doing anything that's biblically forbidden. Again, only in the Beis HaMikdash can this happen, because the word v'moshvotechem, that's what the Gemara wants to learn. So the Gemara says, Matkif la Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda challenged Rav Huna's statement. He said, if it is true that the verse permits kindling the fire chamber fire on Shabbat, afilu b'Shabbat nami, then the Mishnah should permit kindling the fire even on Shabbat, right? So Mishnah should, why does the Mishnah permit doing so only on Friday, close to nightfall? That's what it says. Doesn't say you can do it on Shabbat. If you can do it on Shabbat, leave me alone. So Ela Amar Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda said, Kra Kiyata, when the verse cited by Rav Huna comes to permit kindling a fire in the temple on Shabbat, the Mishrei Evarim Ufaradim Hu Da'ata. It comes only to permit the burning of the sacrificial parts and the fats on the temple altar. The kindling on this fire chamber pyre, however, is biblically forbidden on Shabbat. He says, he explains, the Torah emphasizes that fire may not be kindled in any of your dwellings to indicate that in the temple, the burning of the sacrificial parts and fats of Friday's offerings is permitted all through Friday night. For the Torah permits this temple service on the Shabbat as it does other temple services, such as slaughtering the requisite offerings, which should normally also be forbidden on Shabbat, right? I can't slaughter on Shabbat. But the kindling of the pyre on the fire chamber, which is for personal comfort for the priest and not for any direct service, that remains prohibited. Okay, that was their heater. Okay. So what's going on here? So he explains for Kohanim the reason that the reason that it is permitted just before Shabbat, and we are not concerned that one might come to stroke the fire after nightfall, is the Kohanim are conscientious. That's why he says it. That's why they translate the reason. I never heard of it translated conscientious, but fine. The Kohanim doing the service in the temple were all God-fearing Torah scholars and mindful of what they were doing, and they would not therefore forget themselves and stroke the wood after nightfall. The other part of that, of course, is there are many Kohanim there. So we have a lot of laws that would, if I'm alone in my room in the days of, days of candles really, where I would lean the candle to get more oil, so on and so forth. Yeah. So I cannot read by myself. But if somebody else is there, then they would stop me before I do it. Same thing when if I have the light switch, I can go 1, 2, 3. So all those things you would have to worry about if I'm alone. But otherwise, you would not have to worry about that. Okay? Because we're all, in this case, a Kohanim are conscientious, so it's a reason for mitzvot. In other cases, we would just say there's other people there. Okay, so now we go to page 21, A1. Okay? 21A1. And we should be with you at this point. 21A1. 21A1, and we are at Tane. We do Shmanim. Right? Okay. That's my kick. That's the wrong one. Oh, right. No. It says the Mishnah stated. Do you have it? Mishnah stated, Lo b'Shem and kick, not with kick oil. You have the kick oil?
I got Rabbi Barchama next.
Okay. You'll wait a little. So, you should get there too. So it says, My Shem and kick. What is kick oil? So Amar Shmuel said, She'iltinu l'chol nachute yama. I asked all the seafarers what this kick oil was. He didn't know what kick oil was. V'amruli, and they told me, it's an oaf echad yesh b'karche hayam. This is a particular bird found in the seaports. Ushvekik shemo, and kick is its name. So they say oil was extracted from this bird and used as fuel for pumps. For lamps. It is to such oil that the Mishnah refers. So apparently we had this bird.
Like a seagull?
I don't know.
Is it around the ocean? Is it around the water?
Yeah. When they don't say what the bird is, you just have to go with the statement. So it could be a seagull. Could be something like that. I'm not sure. So Rav Yitzchak bereid Rav Yehuda Amar. Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Yehuda, said, no, it is not a bird. That's not where we get the oil from. It's mishma dekaza. It's cottonseed oil.
It's
Cottonseed oil.
real cotton.
Cotton.
Cottonseed.
Yeah.
Wow.
We know cotton. We have it, right?
Yeah, for Pesach.
There you go. Remember, anything that anything oil is going to burn.
Yeah.
So the question is, does it burn well? In the Mishnah that we were dealing with, if we would go to the Mishnah, it's really oils that will burn well, clear and well, and you won't have to keep tending to it. Those would be the oils that you could use. If it's oils that are not burning well, so that would be the oil that you should not burn.
It's talking about for a Shabbos lamp. Is that what it's talking about?
Right.
So that you won't be inadvertently, I got to straighten it out
Correct.
and make it burn.
Straight, right. You don't want to do that. So apparently kick oil was not a good oil to use. Again, if you go back to the Mishnah, whereas the Mishnah is right here, it says, with what may we kindle the Sabbath lights and what may we not kindle? We say it every Friday night.
Yeah.
So it said, the Mishnah first enumerates the materials that is disqualified for wicks. Find now the fuels. So it says, we're not neither with pitch, nor wax, nor with kick oil, nor with oil that must be burned, nor with fat, and all these reasons, nor with fat from the sheep's tail, and nor with tallow, and so on and so forth. So those are the questions. Those are what's not allowed for. And does he bring it down? Yeah, so these are hard fatty tissues whose consumption the Torah prohibits. Again, it would be hard to do, and it would be hard to burn. It wouldn't be a good burner. So you want a good burner. You don't have to worry about it. So was it this bird, the seagull oil, or was it the cottonseed oil? And he says, Amarava Babrachana Ledidi Chazili Kikion Diona. I myself have seen Yona's Kikayon plant. See that? He saw the Kikayon plant. Okay.
That's the Jonah's gourd plant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was he said he saw it. So the Didi Chazili Kikion Diona, I myself saw I'm sorry, I said it again. It's Lovia Dami, and it resembles a rhinoceros plant. Okay? A plant with the large palmate leaves and very thick oil, castor oil.
Yeah.
Udamish where is it? Uda fishke rabe, and it grows in the moisture from the moisture in ponds. Ve'alpum chanuta madlinyate. Merchants hang it above the entrances of their stores for shade and fragrance. Umafarsidohi avde mishcha, and from kernels people produce oil. Uvanfoi naichan kol briche demarava, and under his branches rested all the sick of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, and that is, it's an interesting thing. So we had a discussion as to what kick oil was. Was it the seagull oil? Was it cottonseed oil? Or was it castor oil?
Kick oil, kikayon. Huh?
Okay, but it could be from the, and that would be a play on words. So kikayon from that plant, and you get castor. That's what I'm saying. Castor oil. That would be castor oil. They're saying, or it's either castor oil, cottonseed oil, or a animal-based oil.
Yeah,
one of those three.
Interesting.
We're not allowed to use. The most interesting thing about this is that they did not know for sure. So what that would basically mean is that all three would be forbidden to use.
Wow.
Right? If I don't know what the kick was, I just know that they're burning hard, so it's a hard thing to burn. So I'm using that definition.
The Gemara is saying what they used to avoid.
Yeah, so apparently Shmuel would avoid one, Rabbi Yitzchak the other, and Rabbi Barchana was trying to use proof, again playing on words, and also that these people used this kikayon plant as apparently to they would rest under the plant, all the sick, which is an interesting thing that we have to be told. Yes.
So they're not saying what they should use for lighting the Shabbos. They're saying what they don't. Why
Right. No, that's correct. You're saying what they don't because that doesn't burn well, which means that everything else we didn't mention you could.
Okay, so if it's not on that list, you can burn it.
Yes. Again, the condition is that it doesn't. I'll say it like this: as long as it burns clean, then you can do it. If it doesn't burn clean and it would fall into maybe one of these categories, so then you should probably not do it. Okay.
Because you mentioned you say they would rest under the shade. That's we learned on our last trip to Israel. That's we saw those plants growing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and of course this was in like February. The leaves were about this big then, but I looked it up, and it said these plants they're annuals. And they grow huge in 1 year. And so Jonah Russa, planted the gourd, I think is
right.
And the plant grew
He
up.
didn't plant anything.
Oh well,
He didn't plant. It just grew.
And,
Right.
and as he must have been sitting there for a while though, because
it grew up overnight. It says
can grow like 15 feet wide or something.
It says it grew up overnight.
Oh, so all right.
It was a miracle.
Yeah, but
It's a miracle.
but they do grow big.
Okay.
It says it.
Now we got 21a2. At the bottom of the page where the Gemara extends the rulings of the Mishnah. Okay? So, that's not, no, I think you should be where you are.
Where'd you skip to?
21a2.
Okay.
So, Tane Rami Barchama. There you go. Okay? So now we have Petilot Shmanim Shamrucham, the wicks and the oils containing which the sages say, Eid Manlikin Behen B'Shabbat, that we may not kindle them on the Shabbat. So, we learn from this, we may also not kindle it with them in the holy temple. Why? Because it says in the pasuk, in the verse in Exodus, which speaks of the kindling of the temple menorah, lahalot nir tamid, that it has to kindle the lamp continually. So again, what we're talking about is wicks that will draw the oil well and will burn continually. You have some wicks that are not good conductors, for lack of better terms, and you have oil that's thick that won't go that well. It's interesting that they picked on the on wax because we use wax today, so it's a different type of wax, I'm guessing, than in those days. But anyway, so it says, V'hai tanele v'hu amalei. So Rav Chama taught the Braita, and he himself elucidated it, which means he expanded his teaching and how it derived from the verse. And he says, Kedei shtehei shalhevet ola me'eleha. The unusual use of the word laha'alot, to cause it to come up, to cause the light to go up, teaches that one must choose wicks and oil so that the flame will ascend by itself. And it should not need to be ascended, it will not ascend by other means. So he says, if inferior wicks and oils are used in the temple menorah, a steady, erect, ascending film will not be attained without tilting or frequent adjustments. That's what we just said. Fine. So, Simcha, so then it says, Tanan, wait, I have a challenge for you. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah in Sukkah, which describes, and we're going to hear about the famous Simcha Beit HaShoeva here. On Sukkahs, they would, with the water libations, they would pour water libation. They changed the whole, they became the Torah center there. They changed everything around. The normal place, what we call the Ezra's Nashim, would be the women's courtyard, which was biggest part of the temple precinct, the most space. So they would clear that out, and they would make that that the men would now dance in the women's section, and then the enactment that they made was that they would separate the men from the women in that area itself, and they made stands or whatever the case is going to be, and they made the women stand behind the wall or on the stands, and the men were the ones who were dancing, and that would be to stop frivolity. From there, by the way, we get the mechitza. Or the need for the mechitza. Yeah.
Hold on. The Gemara extends ruling to Mishnah because.
Say it again.
No, I'm just trying to find where we are.
It says the Gemara challenges the brightest ruler.
Challenges.
Right on top.
21, 8,
2, 3, 21, 3. We turn the page. Okay, so it says Tanan, the second paragraph. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Bimbale machnise kohanim umen yenehem. So from the worn out trousers of the kohanim and their belts, hayu mavkiyin, they would tear and make wicks. Umehen madliken, and they would kindle them. So the Mishnah thus teaches that wicks made out of wool were used in the temple, even though they are prohibited for Shabbat use. And we just finished saying that if you can't use for Shabbat, you can't use it in the temple because you have to go up by itself. Yeah.
So the clothes that they were wearing had.
When they were wearing, they were worn out.
When they were worn out, so they get a new one, but they'd have these worn out pairs of clothes.
Right. And so
and
they
repurpose them as wool.
wicks.
Huh.
Yes.
It seems kind of. So have you ever seen like the fur trapper, like the classic fur trapper, with like the fringes on the arms and stuff?
No.
The like.
I'll take your word for it, but
they had like all those like leather bands and stuff
Yes.
on their arms and legs.
Okay.
I think that was used.
Buckskin shirt.
It was a buckskin shirt, but I think those like those things
No,
where
that's-
they
That jacket's called buckskin.
okay, but they take them off and they use them to like tie things up.
Okay, good. So same sort of thing. We're reusing it. No wasting. Okay. So again, he says in 24, 25, and 26. Just run through the whole thing so you can see it. Okay, so he says in Sukkah, which describes the joyous celebration held during the nights of Sukkot in the women's courtyard, the Ezra's Nashim of the temple. These celebrations were known as Simchas Beit HaShoeva. Again, this is the Simcha, the joy of the water ceremony. So the women, by the way, the reason they did that was, of course, to pray for rain. Okay, because rain comes from God. It doesn't come from the clouds.
Say in Hebrew again, the joy.
Simchat Beit HaShoeva. The water draw. What?
Eva is drawing.
Shoeva.
Oh, okay.
Drawing. Shoeva. So the women's courtyard was illuminated by a gold candelabra. And the episode, which now cited in the Mishnah, discusses how the wicks were made. In a rare exception to the prohibition against wearing shatnez, a mixture of wool and flax and wool, the Kohanim donned belts made of twisted wax, twisted linen, and turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool. It was from these predominantly woolen belts that wicks for the Simchat Beit Shoeva were manufactured. And then it says it challenges. Wait a second, we can't use it. We can't use it for Shabbat. So as the Braita taught above, they added to them the Mishnah's list of disqualified substances, all wicks made of wool and of hair. So Tosfos and Rashba question the validity of the challenge. They argue that since the Kohen's belt is a combination of wool and flax, and since the Mishnah condones the use of carded flax on the Shabbat, the belt can be considered a case of a valid wick material wrapped over an invalid material. Okay, so one covers the other. Now, with regard to the Shabbat, that combination is rabbinically prohibited, lest one come to kindle with the invalid material alone, as Rabbi stated above. However, no such concern exists in the temple case, and so there was a prohibitory, safeguard is unnecessary. Obviously, then, the two cases will have different rulings, and so no challenge can be posed from one ruling against the other. That's one way to answer that, or to ask a question on, actually. Tosfos and Rashba answer that since the Kohen's belt contains 3 parts of wool to 1 part of flax, the flax content is considered nullified. Hence, viewing the Kohen's belt as a valid material wrapped over an invalid material is not legitimate, for it is deemed as if it were wholly made of wool. Okay, so that you understand the question. If I cannot use for Shabbat, then, and we had a rule that whatever I can use for Shabbat, I can use in the temple. How is it that I could use this for the temple, but not on Shabbat? And it was not on Shabbat that we're using this temple, we're doing it on the Simcha Beit HaShoeva, but still now we have this rule that the fire has to go up on the wick by itself. And if this is not a good wick, so it's not going to happen. So what happens? The Gemara says another challenge. Tashema, come and learn a proof that woolen wicks were used even by the menorah's kindling. Titani Rabbi Bar Matna, for Rab Bar Matna taught a bright to this effect. It says, Bikta Kahuna Shabalu, again, with regard to the priestly vestments that were worn out, Mafkinotam, they would tear them. Mehenayu Osim Petilo, the Mikdash, and make wicks for the temple. Once again, we're hearing the same thing. My love, Kalayim, to what vestments does the bright refer? Is it not, among others, to the one composed of the mixture of wool and flax from the Kohen's belt? So the Gemara, the bright, that contradicts Rami Bar Chame's Breita. So the Gemara deflects this as well. This is low, the boots. This is not correct. The Mishnah refers to the priestly garments made of linen, which is an approved wick material. So he says, in 27, he says the suggestive term lahalot, which prohibits the use of inferior oils and wicks, was stated only with regard to the menorah's kindling. Hence, the Simcha Beit Shu'eva kindling was not subject to the verse's restrictions, right? Because it's not Shabbat. So what Ibn refers also not for the temple service. Why do they light menorahs in the women's section?
They knew what was going on.
What?
They knew what was going on. So they knew what was going on.
What does that mean?
What the men were doing, how were they?
For light.
Oh, okay.
For light. Simply put, for light. They needed light. It's at night, so it needs light. So you want to make light, so you light menorahs. And so if I'm going to light menorahs, it's not a service. It's not Shabbat, it's not a service. So what do I care what I use? Let anything burn, I can always mish it around and make more light. No big deal. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then it says, no, you know what? They really didn't do that. What they had was they used garments of linen, which is made of flax, which would be good. Okay. So Amar Rav Huna. So Rav Huna said, Petilim ushmanim sh'am chachamim. Regarding the wicks and the oils of which the sages says, Ein malikim behem b'Shabbat, we may not kindle with them on the Shabbat. Ein malikim behem b'Chanukah. Oh, in the middle of nowhere, suddenly we're talking about Shabbat, and we jump to Chanukah. This is the famous thing about Chanukah. You would think that just as Purim has a Masechta, Megillah, everything else has a Masechta, a separate Masechta. Yeah. It comes to Chanukah. Chanukah is such an important holiday, right? We defeated the enemy and so on and so forth, and we got back Israel. We would stay there for, according to the Rambam, 200 years until we would be taken over. Again, we went to another Gemara, which it really wasn't even that long, but we had some independence. Still, if not for the Chashvanayim, Torah would have been lost. You would think that they should get a separate Masechta. No separate Masechta. They get 3 pages or 4 pages in the Gemara Megillah, in the Gemara of Shabbat. Oh. And how do they talk about it? Because we're talking about what to light and which oils to use. Okay, so it's a side point. It says, "Ein malikim behem b'Shabbat." We may not kill with them on Shabbat. Ein malikim behem b'Chanukah. Those which we can't use on Chanukah either. Behem b'Shabbat b'Chol, whether it be on the Shabbat or on the weekdays. So Amar Rava, my time of Rav Huna. What's the reason of Rav Huna ruling like this? Sabar, because he holds Kavta Zakuk La, that if one's Chanukah light became extinguished, one is obligated to rekindle it. And it's also permissible to make use of the Chanukah's light illumination. Now, we don't hold that, obviously, right? So, 31, 32. I think I've... I'm going through a part. Okay. I'm just going to give it to you, but it's not, this is not anymore. Oh, that's what happened. Oh, okay. Fine. That's what happened. I missed a part. I skipped. I'm sorry, I skipped. It says, let's go back 1 second, because I skipped one part that's very important. It said, we learned in the Mishnah that from the torn or worn out trousers they would tear it and so on and so forth. They would light it. How is that possible? So that's what it says. The challenge is deflected. Simcha beit shoeva ishani. That the kindling performed at the Simchas Beit Shoeva celebration is different, since it is not of biblical origin. Mm-hmm. Hence, even woolen wicks may be used for that event. That's the part that I missed. This next part is not part of. Is not part of, what do you call it? Ein Yakov. This is the Gemara. Then goes on to say what it's saying. Fine. Where we have to go. But you now have the understanding. I gave, by accident I did it, but I gave the understanding. Chanukah is just brought in by the way. Okay? Mm-hmm. So now we go to 21, where is it? 21b. 21b1. Okay? And now we go for the whole kin kabul of, this is what you would call it, if you had to call it, you would call this Masechta Chanukah. Okay? So here we go. And it's interesting too also that the Gemara, the Ein Yakov gives an introductory clause which is not in the Gemara. That's also very interesting. Normally in the text he will just simply quote the Gemaras. Okay? But this time he gives the intro, it seems, because I couldn't find these words in the Gemara. So I'm guessing it must be his introduction. Mm-hmm. He says, Kishabau b'Gemara. When the Gemara comes, the Faresh, Shemana umbetilot, the oils and the wicks, the matnitim of the Mishnah, Hashkirum that were mentioned, they mentioned his kirum le'inyan Chanukah. They also mentioned Chanukah. That's how it. So if you go back to that thing, right? We said Shmanim Sha'amru Chachamim Em Alikim b'Shabbat Em Alikim b'Chanukah. That's what he was referring to, but he didn't quote it from the Gemara because he didn't want to go. It's a halachic argument here, so we're not into that. This is Bein Yaakov. So then he says, okay, now we're going to, where is it? Right, so he says, I'm a Rav. So if you go to, it's right, the third opinion regarding the use of inferior oils and wicks. You got it? On 21b1. Again, the third opinion. A third opinion regarding the use of inferior oils. So it says, I'm a Rav Zera. Am I right? I'm a Rav Zera? No, I'm sorry. I messed up again. I'm a Rav Yirmiyah, I'm a Rav Yirmiyah. So this opinion is also lucid, right? So I'm Rav Yirmiyah, my time of the Rav. What is the reason for Rav's ruling this way? What did Rav say? Well, we'll find it. Sabar, because he holds kavta en zakukla. He holds. Oh, right here. So what did Rav said that regarding the wicks and oils of which the sages say we may not kindle with them on the Shabbat. We may, however, kindle with them on Chanukah, both weekday and Shabbat. Why did he rule this way? Sabar, because he holds kavta en zakukla, that if one's Chanukah light becomes extinguished, one is not obligated to rekindle it, and is forbidden to make use of it on the Chanukah, make use of the Chanukah light's illumination. So he said that is even during the week when kindling is permitted, one is not at all obligated to rekindle an extinguished Chanukah light. However, possible negligence is not a factor. Now, this doesn't mean that if I put it by the window and it goes out, I put it by the window where the wind is blowing and it goes out, that I do not have to light it. I'm an idiot. So that is not permissible. On the other hand, if I put it where there are no windows, where there's no breeze going through, and it would go out on its own, again, I did everything possible and went out on its own after I lit it. So not right away either, but let's say halfway through, or whatever the case is, I need not relight it. That's what he's saying. I need not relight it. I did my job. It went out. But what happened was, what we do say is, it's always best to relight it, but I'm not obligated. So if I'm not obligated, that's his point. If I'm not obligated, I don't have to worry about the wicks or the oil that I'm using. Whether or not it's going to pull the oil well or not, so on and so forth. I don't have to worry about it. And let's also assume that we're only lighting one candle. Let's make it fun here. Because if I'm lighting 8 candles, so you could argue that, or whatever the day is, that as long as one's lit, I fulfill my mitzvah, so leave me alone. But let's say make it one candle, one house, one candle, that's it. And so I lit that, and every night I lit that, and it didn't, for whatever reason, it didn't stay lit, so I don't have to relight it again according to this. And then, so the purpose of the mitzvah of Hanukkah is to publicize the great miracle that Hashem wrought for the Jewish people. If one were allowed to make personal use of the Hanukkah lights, it would not be apparent that they were lit for the mitzvah. That's how Rashi explains that. Okay, that's why we can't use it. That's why you have the shamash. So that in case you are using it, you argue you're using the shamash, not the light of the candles. Rashba and Ron advance a different reason for the prohibition. They say, inasmuch as the mitzvah of kindling lights on Hanukkah was instituted to commemorate the miraculous burning of the temple's menorah oil, the rabbis formulated the mitzvah to conform with the laws of the menorah. Since it is forbidden to make use of the menorah's light for they are sacred, the rabbis prohibited using the Hanukkah lights. The Rashba offers a third reason. Making personal use of the Hanukkah lights is an act of disrespect toward the mitzvah. Whatever its rationale, Archgol says, the prohibition against utilizing the Hanukkah lights for personal needs guarantees that the oil will not come, that one will not come to tilt his menorah on the Shabbat and thereby perform a forbidden labor. Rav therefore sanctified the use of inferior materials for the Sabbath kindling of the Sabbath lights as well. Now, we also have to remember a couple more things. Where do you put the Hanukkah menorah? By the window or by the door. Where do you put your Shabbos candles?
By the dining room table.
By the dining room table, because you want to see what you're eating. Again, one is for light, one is for show. So that by itself is going to be a reminder for the person that they're not supposed to get any benefit from it. Okay? And on top of that, you're not, why would I put it by the, and some people put it outside. If I'm in Israel, it's supposed to put it outside by the gate. So again, so people will see it. You want to publicize a miracle. If it's outside by the gate, I'm going to keep running back and forth to make sure that it's lit. So in all these different cases, you have an interesting concept as to, what I can do and what I can't do. Fine. Let's remove the Rabbanan Kameda Abaye. So let me just do a little more. So Amaruha Rabbanan Kameda Abaye Mishmei Rav Yirmiyah. So the rabbi stated this explanation of Rav's ruling before Abaye in the name of Rav Yirmiyah of Yolo Kibla, but he did not accept it. Abaye did not accept Rav Yirmiyah's explanation that Rav allowed kindling with inferior wicks and oils because he held that it is not that one is not obligated to rekindle and extinguish Hanukkah light. Amar. So he did not accept it. Ki ata Rav, and when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, so Amarua Rabbanan Kameda Abaye Mishmei Rav Yochanan. So the rabbi stated the identical explanation before Abaye in the name of Rav Yochanan v'Kibla, and this time he accepted it. Amar, he said, I zakai gemirte l'shemaite mikara. If I had been worthy, I would have acquired Rav's teaching earlier. So the Gemara says, hi, Gemara, but he learned it now. What difference does it make when he learned it? So nafkamina legersa diyankuta. The difference is in regard to the studies of one's youth, which are more enduring than one's later years. So he said, when Ravin and Rav Dami were two Amarayim from Eretz Yisrael who traveled between the academies of their homeland and of Babylonia to transmit the teachings of one group to another. Ravin had apparently reported that Rav Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael interpret Rav's dictum as did Rav Yirmiyah in Bavel, and the rabbis conveyed this information to Abaye. That is, if I had merited to accept the explanation of Rav's teaching early in my life, I would have incorporated it into my oral text, and that was the subject of his constant study and review. And that's where we go. So it's bottom line is that whatever I learn in my youth is going to stick with me more than what I learn when I get older. But we're also getting, like I said, into the story of Hanukkah, which will be for the next couple of, surely next week. Okay?
21B2 is where that's on?
21B. It's going to be on 21B. I didn't get that far. I knew we would go this far. Okay. Where's it going to end up?